Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our customer interview webinar. Today, we are welcoming Jacob King, the Organization and Development Supervisor at ELDOR Automotive Powertrain. He will be sharing his insights into achieving operational excellence. Interviewing Jacob will be Ted Jackson, one of ClearPoint Strategy's two founders. The audience will be muted for the duration of this webinar, but we encourage you to submit any questions into the Q&A tab. Go ahead and take it away, Ted.
Thanks, Jenna. And thanks, Jacob. Thanks for joining us. Please tell us a little bit more about ELDOR and about your role there.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. So ELDOR is a global automotive parts manufacturer. We have plants that are located in Brazil, Turkey, Italy, China, and currently in Delville, USA as well. And one of the things we do is we manufacture ignition coils, and we have certain other components across the globe that we do manufacture, but the main piece that we actually contribute to part of ELDOR in the US is ignition coils, and we have roughly around 12 to 15 different types that we create for varying brands such as Ford, Chevrolet, and even some parts for Ferrari that are made in Italy.
Excellent. And tell me about your role there and how you got involved with reporting, strategy reporting.
So OSD is kind of a different department to have. It is one of those departments that was created by ELDOR, from my understanding at least. OSD is you could say it's Organization Systems Development is what the acronym stands for. But we do a lot of process improvement. So that's everything from the actual industry itself, or the automotive manufacturing itself, to even working with certain individuals to see how you can streamline some processes or how their workflow is going to affect the day-to-day results. So one of the things that is also concluded in OSD is reporting for KPIs. And we use KPIs for a multitude of different areas in the organizations, such as HR. We have some in EHS, which is our environment, health and safety, the plastics department, assembly, and quality.
Okay, excellent. And how were you doing reporting before ClearPoint, and what made y'all decide to upgrade?
So previously, we were actually using PowerPoint and Excel, and you could almost say a multitude of other different software programs to just kind of collect the data that we had and threw it all together. It was almost a mosh posh of just numbers and images coming in, and we were using that to try to display in a visually appealing method. But a lot of the times it was kind of, like I mentioned, thrown together, and it took an absurd amount of time for us to actually create what we needed to see, which we would then review, within 30 minutes to an hour on a weekly basis. So coming into ELDOR, I had previously worked for Korean Clinic that actually also used ClearPoint itself. And that is kind of what introduced me to the software. And it was what kind of led into the arrangement that we have now to begin using ClearPoint.
And was it an easy internal sale? Was there resistance? How did you push to clean up the Excel and PowerPoint mess?
So ELDOR itself they're pretty budget oriented around a lot of their processes that they do, especially being in the automotive world. So with the automotive industry, you could lose $1 million a day of downtime. And with that, every dollar that is spent is something that has to go to effect and, possibly save $2 somewhere else. So looking into ClearPoint, one of the things that we conducted was a time study. And for that, I went around and talked to each department and interviewed every individual that had some type of hand in the bucket that were manipulating the KPIs of some sort, and collected the time that they spent on a weekly or monthly basis to see how it was affecting each department with all the individuals within it, combined everything, and then understood that, once you added every department together, we were spending probably $120,000 a year in just labor time. And once we concluded that that was the amount that we had total just for time spent, aside from actually having the reports themselves, we then monitored what it would be to use ClearPoint. And we came up with the conclusion that we were going to be saving over 80% of that time, which came to around, you could say $15,000 to $20,000 at that point at a yearly rate. And one of the things, we're saving 80% of the cost from that. But while you're saving $100,000 here, that $100,000 can then go to somewhere else in the pot. So as I mentioned with downtime, that $100,000 can be something that is implemented into another spot on the line that could then save us that reduction in time. So if we had, let's say, an event that came up that we seen that was going to cost $15,000, or you would have to put that machine down for an allotted amount of time, we could then allocate that $15,000 from the pot that we had now saved, and then reduce the downtime that we had again, which, depending on the effect the downtime would have, can be an exponential factor. So aside from the actual $100,000 that was saved, you're then looking at a number that can't be stated.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It sounds like there's a multiplier effect, right?
Absolutely.
As you reinvest that money, that savings, and if you can stop the plant from going down for a couple of days, you've saved a couple of $1 million.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the 80% reduction alone, is a selling point in itself. But for the actual future issues that could arise from it,
Yeah, that's great. So tell me a little bit about how, like you mentioned a little bit, you had kind of ClearPoint running in different departments. Like, is it everywhere? Like, how do you have ClearPoint organized?
So for the main portion of ClearPoint that we have all of our reporting is on the individual departments. We do start with the plant scorecard, which is what we consider the parent. The plant then is fed by three children's scorecard, which are the culture, which is mainly concluded of the HR department. We have the assembly department and plastics department, which within ELDOR it's split. So within plastics and assembly, you have quality, finance, the production efficiency itself, which is again plastics and assembly at that point, logistics, and our EHS department.
That's great. It sounds like, in a lot of the for-profit organizations we work with, you see, the line units running and then support services. That sounds pretty similar. But one of the things you had also mentioned early on is that you report weekly. Is that weekly in assembly and plastics, or weekly kind of everywhere? How do you do this weekly reporting?
So it is cumbersome, as you mentioned, because within automotive, there are countless data sets that we're pulling, but we do report most of everything on a weekly basis. And that is, in a nutshell, we're just reporting assembly and plastics on a weekly basis, which those are the ones that are consisted mostly of all the departments that were mentioned earlier. And for those, we do have some that also have monthly reporting. So finance, for example, we have on a monthly basis, which falls under the plant scorecard. The culture is reported on a monthly basis as well, but we also have some of those specific KPIs that are pulled out on a weekly basis. So we have, you could say, labor time or overtime rate from HR for the assembly department and plastics department.
Gotcha. So weekly sounds like an operations scorecard. Is it called a strategy system or an operation system? How do you talk about it internally at ELDOR?
So we do use it as operational and strategy, since it is, we're looking at data by the hour. And while we're doing that, that's while we see all the KPIs and how they're being shown at the moment, whether they're within tolerance, within target, or out of tolerance, that then leads to a more strategy objective. So if we see that a KPI is, and let's say within tolerance or out of tolerance, then that's going to lead to us start to analyze that KPI and give recommended path forwards to how we can actually reduce or raise the number depending on the KPI.
Got you. And in a weekly world, we think about our current clients saying, okay, if we have monthly or quarterly reporting, we take 2 weeks to do a reporting workflow and then a week to review the data and then have a meeting. The meeting might be 2 or 3 weeks later. How do your meetings work? Like, tell me about how the cadence works of getting data? If you do write up any kind of analysis, how does it happen over the course of the week?
Absolutely. So since it is on a weekly basis, our weeks run Monday to Friday, but we do our reporting on Wednesday and Thursday. We have our plastics department reporting on Wednesday and our assembly department reporting on Thursday. But considering that we need the previous week's data, we have to be done completely set Friday. And then we don't begin our reporting until Monday morning of the following week, which is the week that we report on the previous week. But in some cases, we do have some specific users that have to wait for other individuals to input their data prior to actually finishing their KPI. And aside from that, to that point, it could take them up till Tuesday or even the day of reporting for it to be concluded and actually generating a report. But we do have specific cases such as our quality department to where we are using certain pieces of machinery such as or software that we use Smart Factory, which pulls a lot of our machine data for us and generates a Excel file. Now, while that does collect all of our machine pieces that are seen, quality defects, we do have actual operators that go through and detect visual errors themselves. So even though we do have a lot of that reporting, let's say the end of day by Friday, we still have to give the operators time themselves to actually then, once they collect the data from the machines, to then add their visual data into the numbers themselves.
So you end up, that's what I was going to say, is it sounded like you were about to say it's automated, all of the data coming out of Smart Factory, but then kind of I heard you say there are manual adjustments made by people that are working on the line, either adjusting the numbers. Is it up or down? Like, how do you make sure someone makes a real adjustment and not just an adjustment to make their numbers look better?
So a lot of the machines are automated for their reporting, which does make it nice. But again, to that extent, there are also going to be adjustments that are made on the machine side and the user side. So we normally have multiple sets of operators that go through the visual data that is collected. And then we have certain supervisors that go through and also review the data prior to it being entered. So a lot with that is once we do have visual scrap, let's say, they take the visual scrap and they set it aside because that actually has to be separated according to what type of scrap is. And they are then counted, and that's kind of also another way that we go about adjusting our strategy towards the line or for scrap rate. But with that, we can also have certain supplier quality defects, which would then go into an adjustment on the actual data itself. But for specific certain circumstances, we have what is called a let me pull it up here real quick. We have a change request form. And what that does is it allows us to put in something for, let's say if it wasn't our issue itself, it was an issue that came from a supplier, we're not going to specifically count that towards our KPI if it was something that was out of our hands. So a lot of things, they normally go through 2 to 3 different sets of individuals prior to it actually being validated and sorted to ClearPoint.
Excellent. Can you show us how this works?
Yeah, absolutely.
That you can share within ClearPoint?
So the first one that I can show is our EHS department. And our EHS, as mentioned, is our environment, health, and safety. And one of the things interesting about ELDOR is that I know a lot of people are familiar with 5S. ELDOR has actually implemented 7S, is what we call it. And it's just an extension, obviously, of the same thing, but just to a different standard. ELDOR is probably one of the cleanest facilities you will ever see. If you absolutely wanted to, you could probably eat off the floor, but I don't recommend it, but it's something that could be done. There is no speck of dust on any machine, under the machine, within any spot of the plant. So we do measure our 7S, is what we consider it under ClearPoint. And we have this set up to be on a weekly basis as well, but we have what we consider major nonconformities, medium, and minor. Now, these aren't set by any audit regulatory systems or anything, but these are what are set by ELDOR standards that we have, and that's how these measurements are taken. And a lot of the times for the 7S, we have an audit that is completed the previous week, and it is done by one of our EHS specialists. They'll go through and they'll audit the plastic side and the plant side and find anything that may be out of place. So for example, an example of a minor nonconformity could be that you did not put a tool back in the correct placement in a toolbox. That's kind of the levels that ELDOR will get into with other manufacturing. But what we'll do is we'll combine our minors, our mediums, and our majors into one set. So we have the minor set up as a 0.25, the medium set up as a 0.5, and a major set up as 1. And within the week, depending on how many nonconformities are found for that specific part of the plant, they combine them together to give you an overall score, or our actual in this case. So for example, this week was not a hot week to see. But the previous week, you could see we did have 3 minor nonconformities. So that totaled to 0.75, which put us within our tolerance and target. So our target was set at 2, and our tolerance was at 3. And now it does have a varying score. So depending on how your 7S does, it will be a sliding scale. So for this week, example, week 29 was way out of target and out of tolerance. So there was a score of 0, which as the previous week, we got the full score of 10. And you could say for May of 2024, we had an actual of 3, which put us right at the bare limit of our tolerance, which gave us a score of 4. And with that, we usually keep our reporting on at least for the weekly reports, we have it at a 5-period scale. So you'll see the previous 4 weeks, including the month within this. So we start at week 26, since given that June, well, the following period that we're in, June follows week 26, and then 27, 28 in the current week that we're in for July. And then we usually will show our monthly averages or sums, depending on the KPI below. And within our dashboards of every KPI, we kind of show the initiatives that it's affecting. So it does affect the safety, which is our overall safety for the plant, and the assembly safety. We have the target owners. We'll have an analysis, which isn't complete for this week because this is the week that we're reporting on. So this will be done normally by today or tomorrow. But once they conclude their audit, for example, for EHS, the EHS specialist will come in and put in an analysis for that week. And then we'll have a recommended plan of action or path forwards moving forward to better prevent these same circumstances from happening the following week. And then again, just for basic knowledge of the actual KPI, and every one of them, we have the calculation, which for this one is fairly simple. It's just a sum of the nonconformities found and then the unit that everything is measured in.
Yeah, this is great. This shows, I like the way you combine some weekly and monthly reporting in there, because even though you kind of scrolled through some of the charts, you saw your nonconformities were really trending down month over month, from April kind of down. And then you have this one blip. It'll be interesting to see what the analysis is in the next day or so before you do your reporting. Now, do you have to do, do individuals have to do analysis for all measures, or do you have rules? It just seems like there's still a lot of moving parts in weekly reporting.
We do have it recommended. Well, we prefer to have anything that is out of target to have an analysis. So whether it's just within tolerance and out of target, they're still supposed to be putting in a recommendation. And then the same obviously is expected for being out of tolerance completely. So if it isn't green, then we want to see why.
Gotcha. Okay. You had talked about maybe showing something else, or was this going to be the main one?
This was the main one within EHS. I mean, we do have multiple KPIs within our EHS part. So for example, as mentioned, as we have the plant itself does have the plant general safety, but both of these being plastics and assembly, these are total to affect the plant safety itself. And that's kind of how I mentioned earlier, how the plant is the major parent card and the assembly and plastics are the children. The children themselves, I guess you would then say, have grandchildren to the actual parent of the plant. So if you can see on this, ELDOR is the main parent, and then the three that follow, and then every department within it is what feeds the individual three, which lead to the first.
And so would it be common for individuals to be just kind of reporting in one particular department, or would someone own some pieces in logistics and facilities and plastics? Like do a lot of the individuals just look into one department, or do they have access to see how what they're doing impacts the rest of the plant?
So that does vary department to department and by individual base. So currently our EHS manager is our facilities manager. So for example, Joseph Reid does actually have oversight of the facilities department itself. But when you get into logistics, we do have some functions that where quality is affecting some of the numbers that they are seeing. So we do have some users that are inputting some data into other departments, usually two at the same time, is because it's the same report in a lot of cases. So, you know, that one specific report may have 20 different data numbers that we do need to put into ClearPoint. But instead of having 20 different people do it, if you have one individual person that knows specifically where all those numbers go, they're then allotted the recommended path to go ahead and input the numbers for everybody.
And so when we think about the weekly reporting versus monthly reporting, do your weeks add into months? And like, do you have a leadership team getting together on a monthly basis, or is everybody kind of all in on weekly? How do you think about these pieces?
So in just about every KPI that we have, they all do, if they are reported on a weekly basis, they all, depending on the KPI, some average copy and paste, so forth, to every single month. And then the same formula would follow in for the yearly. As for the weekly, we report on, like I said, most things during the weekly basis, but we do have that, which is Wednesday, Thursday, and then we will have a monthly report on the 15th of every month. The weekly reports are usually a combination of all the specific supervisors or people who do input the data for ClearPoint. And then the plant scorecard itself, which is on the 15th of the month, is usually plant-wide and is reported to everybody to see the outcomes of the entirety of the plant and what we can do to actually move together as one.
Excellent. So it sounds like it's been pretty successful for you. I like the smiley faces and frowny faces.
That was something that we actually specifically requested for ClearPoint to have for us, and they thankfully made it. It was something that was used on our previous KPI reporting, and they just wanted to keep it. ELDOR is very specific about their reporting.
I like it. I like it. So what is like when you're looking across ELDOR, what's kind of next on the horizon for reporting?
So currently, since the U.S. plant, Daleville, was the first one to implement ClearPoint, we plan on moving it forwards and actually rolling it out to Brazil and Turkey, possibly in the near future. So we are doing a lot of R&D, but we're at the moment for other components that we're looking into. But the plan moving forwards with ClearPoint is to first implement it into Brazil and Turkey. Brazil being first because it is a smaller plant. And then depending on how the rollout process goes for that, we'll tweak a few things and see how we can adjust it to make it easier for the next plant and then go global.
Well, hopefully you get a few trips to Brazil out of this. What about within the Daleville plant? Any adjustments that you're making there in the future?
So currently ELDOR is growing. We do plan on adding a few more lines to our assembly plant. We currently have L402 is what we call it, which is now being completely ran in a process automation standpoint. So we're in the process of now implementing that into our KPIs. And then eventually the plan is built to sustain what we call L403 and L404. So once those lines are fully assembled and running to full speed, we will then implement that also into ClearPoint.
Excellent.
So every plant is going to have the potential to grow within once it even has ClearPoint. So for us, we have almost 2 lines within ClearPoint, which can go up to 4. And then other plants will have, more or less, depending on the size.
Gotcha. I know you had talked to me last week about how you were thinking about doing some communications, like even putting some dashboards up inside the plant, so to make the data even more transparent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it was something that we've been asking for a while, and ELDOR's finally agreed to getting TVs and putting it on both the plastics and assembly side, to where we can then, we have to work out the way we're going to do it still, but we're going to be having it to where it shows our KPI data on an hourly basis, basically, around the whole plant. So you could just walk by the wall, what we consider it, the wall, and see the KPIs themselves and what needs to happen.
Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, it would be really, really interesting to be able to see your ClearPoint charts kind of up on the wall and see how you're doing and how you're able to push your nonconformities down. Make sure, give you the extra incentive to put that tool back where it belongs.
Absolutely. They'll be looking for the frowny faces, especially.
Right. Well, Jacob, I really appreciate you taking the time to explain it. It sounds like to me, what I like about your story is the way you talk about operations and strategy being just intricately, intertwined, let's say. Is like you have to be able to see that operations data to make those strategic decisions on how you improve the line, so to speak.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes every second counts within the automotive world. So if you can see it right then and there to make an adjustment moving forward that's going to affect the rest of the day, that alone can save you thousands of dollars.
Right.
So ClearPoint has been a great tool to implement at ELDOR. I'm ready for it to, be seen on the TVs and actually move out to the other plants to where we can all be intertwined at that point as well on our reporting schedules.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to being there along the way. Thank you again for your time today, and thanks for sharing this story.
Yeah, thank you, Ted.